Yo, how's it going everybody? It's Sketch and welcome back to the channel. And today we're taking a look at some Super Nintendo shoot 'em ups, and I wanted to start with Strike Gunner S.T.G, developed by Athena, Tecmo, and localized by NTVic, releasing in arcades in 1991 and getting a Super Nintendo port in June of 1992. This is a vertical shoot 'em up that plays a lot like Raiden, and the Super Nintendo may not be known necessarily for shoot 'em up games, but there's a healthy handful that stick out amongst a lot the system got over its lifetime. But let's get into the story real quick and see what's up here. In the year 2000 AD, aliens have invaded the Earth and have launched an all-out assault on humanity. Scientists have luckily built two high-tech jets as the ultimate weapon, the Strike Gunner. You'll fly in solo or with a partner to dismantle the alien threat, one missile at a time. Gameplay-wise, this is a 2D vertical shooter, and it's pretty simple in its objective. Try to shoot as many enemies down as you can and don't die, and the game is fairly forgiving with its respawns, allowing you to pick up exactly where you left off, unless you wipe all of your stocks. Early in the game, the enemy patterns are going to start out really simple and be somewhat predictable, but towards the second quarter of the game, the challenge does ramp up a fair bit. It never really quite gets bullet hell levels of crazy, but the screens can still get pretty hectic from time to time. The boss fights on the back end of the game are also pretty challenging until you figure out the patterns, but they'll definitely keep on your toes while you're doing it. You have your primary weapon, which you can upgrade a few times, and a single-use sub-weapon that you can choose at the beginning of each stage. With 15 options, there's a good bit of variety, but whatever you pick, you're stuck with until you either clear the stage or use a continue, so keep that in mind. Several weapons are extremely advantageous on certain stages. The Mega Beam is a one-hit kill on the Naval Destroyer, for example, so this mechanic adds a lot of options to play around with, though on the same coin, certain weapons can leave you in some rough spots if it's not the greatest pick for that level, so trial and error is going to be the best way to figure out what works best, but there's at least more than one fair option for each stage. Graphic-wise, the game admittedly looks bland for the first couple levels, but it does get more varied, and the enemies, at least the base ones, also stay pretty much the same up until the second half of the game. But when it starts to get a little more varied, it gets a lot more interesting, even though the opening levels do drag a little bit compared to the back end. Sprite animations and explosions all look fairly decent, and the bosses are huge and have a good bit of detail. The space stages were pretty dope too, with the meteors that flip over to be the Gorgon Space Cyclops, so there's some cool characters here, but you're gonna see a lot of the same ones too. The ship sprites themselves actually look pretty good too, and the game even works in some Mode 7 even if it is just for the opening cutscene, which in itself is pretty dope. Overall, it's not the most amazing looking shoot 'em up on the system, but it gets by well enough with what it's got available. The only real downside graphics wise, besides a lot of similar sprites early on, is the ending. Not even congratulations or anything, just some angled text that's scrolling from the bottom up showing you the team that developed the game, which is cool, but I get it, it's a shoot 'em up game that doesn't necessarily need an ending, especially if the gameplay and score do loop over, but in this instance, nope. Nothing here, just a credit roll. Sound-wise, you've got some good tunes here, especially on the back end of the game. The music on the space level and stage 2 stuck out the most since they had a good bit of energy behind them. As far as the sound effects, they're decent enough with some weighty explosions, and some of the special weapons also have some oomph to them in the audio department. Altogether, the audio is passable, but there are some better examples of exceptional sound, especially when shoot 'em ups on the system that we'll look into later on. But Strike Gunner does hold its own. Overall, Strike Gunner S.T.G is a fun shoot 'em up to run through, and it's got a fair amount of challenge. The first couple stages are kind of a slow burn, but once everything gets going in tandem, it gets way more interesting in every department. Is it one of the best shoot 'em ups on the system? No, not really. But it's a fun one to play through at least a couple times, and if you can find it for a deal, it's absolutely worth your time. Strike Gunner gets a 7 out of 10. A solid shoot 'em up, even though it's front end that's kind of lacking a little bit compared to the back end, but once the gloves are off, there's a good time to be had. And also I recommend trying this on the higher difficulties to get some additional challenge if normal feels a little too easy. Though depending on your interest in shoot 'em up games, mileage may vary with the enjoyment here. If you made it this far in the video, I thank you again for checking it out. If you find this video helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the future. So until then, take it easy, stay safe out there, and I'll see you on the next one.